All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at Transformers Legacy Evolution Voyager class comic universe Bludgeon. Yeah, this has been a figure that I've been both excited about and not that excited about for a while now because, obviously it's great to get new versions of Bludgeon. It's a character design I've always really loved, but they have pretty much just done a straight repaint with just a new head and a new weapon from Tarn, the figure that we got previously in Legacy Evolution. So, it would have been nice to actually get a new Bludgeon that's his own mold. But that being said, one, Tarn is just a really, really good figure. So at least it's using like a pretty solid mold to do it. And two, it also does suit Bludgeon fairly well just because, he turns into a tank, and this is specifically supposed to be a comic universe Bludgeon, so it's kind of taking his design from the IDW comics, which honestly did have a lot of similarities with Tarn. Like, they weren't really, drawn to be the same sort of, body style or whatever, but he does have treads on his shoulders. It works fairly well, all things considered, which, because it's a comic universe Bludgeon, I guess that kind of excuses why it's not his usual Earth tank, because Bludgeon was actually part of the second year of the Pretenders toy line, which, in the second year they got it together a little bit better, and they had alt modes that were actually something, as opposed to the first year of the Pretenders subline, where all of the alt modes were just kind of like these abstract blobs that however they had to be to fit inside the shells. They actually, were more kind of like actual transforming figures in the second year. So usually, I would prefer Bludgeon be an Earth tank, but, I think that this alt mode works fairly well for him, all things considered. It's just like Tarn. It's a, pretty decent alt mode. It doesn't roll or anything, even though it has little sculpted kind of areas for rolling wheels, which makes me feel like they originally intended it to, and then it just didn't fit into the budget for whatever reason. He does also come with a new weapon, with a sword here that Tarn did not come with. And, because it's a new weapon on an old figure, well, not that old, but you know what I mean, it doesn't really have anywhere to store. I mean, it can store on the outside, like you can plug into the top here, or on the box, they show it plugging into to the side here on one of these arm things, and you can do that on either side. Personally, I feel like the most out of the way is plugging it into the side of the leg here, so it sits like that. Still not perfect, but, I can deal with that. It's a Cybertronian tank. At least it mostly fits within the sort of like curve of the vehicle. So I can deal with that, but it's not what I'd prefer since it makes it, more asymmetrical. But aside from that, articulation, the turret can rotate. These bits are pegged in and can go up and down a little bit, but they don't really have a lot of wiggle room just in terms of like bumping into the back of the legs here. And these little guns in the side can rotate as well. And yeah, just like Tarn, they don't seem to actually like both lock in quite at the same angle. Like you can see this one's a bit more straight, which is annoying. And actually on him, I didn't realize this on Tarn, but you can actually just pop these bits off. And because these are more like an integral part of the Tarn design, I prefer to leave them on for him. But for Bludgeon, I kind of think that it's just better in both modes to not have these. The difference is kind of negligible in tank mode, but in robot mode, I think it helps a lot just in terms of like him not having as much kibble. So I'll leave them on for the sake of the review, but personally I just choose to take these bits off and then kind of leave them in a box somewhere. But yeah, decent looking vehicle mode. It is a nice Cybertronian tank. It is just a little bit unescapably Tarn's tank mode, so to do with that what you will. But yeah, in terms of size comparisons in this mode, for a standard size comparison with an average size deluxe here he is with Kingdom Sideswipe. For another Voyager tank, here he is with Siege Megatron. You can see this mold has always been a little bit small. Like, it's kind of got the height in robot mode, but it doesn't quite have the mass of a lot of other Voyagers, so he's a little bit small. Here he is with our previous Bludgeon from a while ago, from Revenge of the Fallen, Hunt for the Decepticons, one of those, with a more Earth tank there, so you can see what they look like together, and then I guess also, the little Prime Master Bludgeon from Power of the Primes. Here he is with Legacy Evolution, I should say, just so you can see all the, differences there. Like I said, all the sculpted detail is the same. I do wish they had done a little bit more remolding on this guy, aside from just the head and adding the new weapon, but whatever. You can see where the distribution of the painted detail is kind of left out and changed around, so you can see what they look like there together. And then last but not least, here he is with all of our other, sort of updated modern pretenders here. And yeah, I will say that the one thing about using the Tarn mold that really works for him now is that he wouldn't have really otherwise fit in that well with these guys, just because, if he were actually an Earth tank, then, these guys are all based on the Year One pretenders that turned into those weird abstract vehicles, then he wouldn't fit in with them as well. But now having, a Cybertronian tank with 3 other weird Cybertronian vehicles, like, I think that works pretty well. So I guess that is one upside for him, using the Tarn mold rather than having a new figure altogether. So, that's pretty good. And yeah, in terms of transformation, it's exactly the same as Tarn, unsurprisingly. We'll just take off the sword for now, take off the turret. It just tabs into these 2 slots on the legs there, and put that off to the side. Then you want to start off by taking the arms here. They both untab from the side of the legs, and then this green tab goes into the bottom of the foot. So you just want to undo both of those, and then just bring it around like that. Kind of rotate it around, then also hinge it up to accommodate it there. We'll do the arms now. You just untab this panel here, and then just rotate out the forearm there, and then you can take this side of the tread and collapse it up like that. Just like with Tarn, it does do this slight bit of cheating where like this half of the tread that ends up on the outside of his shoulder was actually just hidden underneath in alt mode rather than actually being part of the treads. I can forgive it. I don't love it, but it's fine. But yeah, you just do that on both sides there. And then we just adjust the arms here, take this green panel, rotate it to the other side, rotate the hands around. And just do that on both sides. And there we have the arms all done, just easier to get them out of the way now. Then you want to take the legs here, untab them from this panel, and rotate it up. Also, another issue that I had with Tarn is that I couldn't get this panel to like stay down as much. And he does still have that issue, but it's not quite as bad, I've found. So slight, just kind of your mileage may vary there. But yeah, untab the legs from each other and from that, and then bring it down, and then click the second knee joint into place there, and just rotate down the feet, just like that. And then you want to take this panel, it kind of double hinges up, we can rotate it around, and then you want to both take the chest plate, the head, and the treads here, and kind of rotate them around little by little, because they can't all go around at once. They have to kind of like move with each other. And then also, because he's got a bit of a taller head, you do kind of have to like shift his head to the side on the ball joint to clear that hinge section just with those little horns there, which can be kind of annoying, but once you know to do it, it's not really that difficult. And then yeah, just bring all these around just so you can have these in place. And then once the shoulders are locked into place like that, we can slide them in like that, which allows us to bring the chest plate down and tab them together. And then take this back panel, and it's got 2 little tabs right there that will go into slots up there, and then just double hinge it up like that. And then, kind of adjust his head. And for all intents and purposes, there we have Bludgeon in his robot mode. Let me just adjust the camera here real quick. Now that's just the base robot mode, but obviously we do have some options here. We bring on his weapons. Now with Tarn, what you're supposed to do is rotate this around and put it on his arm, because that was Tarn's design. But I feel like one of the fairly iconic pieces of Bludgeon's design is having those turrets kind of sticking up over the shoulder. I mean, usually it's just the one turret, but still, I think in the IDW design, he did have turrets sticking over his shoulder. Either way, I much prefer plugging this onto the back and leaving that panel rotated around and just doing it like that. I think that's a much nicer look, and it also differentiates him from Tarn just a little bit more, which I appreciate. And likewise, these pieces, for Tarn, you're supposed to flip them up like this. But I feel like that just makes it a little bit too messy with his whole aesthetic, like having, 4 barrels up there and 2 of them at the angle there. So I would either just leave them down like this, or just, like I said, take them off altogether. I feel like that's actually the kind of better, cleaner look there, because then it, you just don't have to worry about those pieces at all. And I don't really think that they add to his tank mode in particular, since that's really much more of a Tarn design. So I'm going to take these off, but that's you know, you've got those options there. And then obviously we can give him his sword here, and I think that that looks pretty good. It is a nice like solid plastic sword. I mean, it's a little bit flexible, but it's not like bendy, which is nice. And I think that looks pretty good. It's a shame that this mold doesn't like already have like the downward wrist movement, because I think that he really could use that for getting some nice sword poses. But still, I think this looked pretty good. Now, in terms of storage for the sword, what you want to do is just peg it onto the back here on the turret, and that works well enough. I do kind of wish that maybe they had thought ahead or retooled a little bit so that he could have like a hole on his hip here to actually like, you know, sheath the sword like that. I think that that would look really nice. If this leg were like easier to take apart rather than being like riveted in at all these spots, I would actually try to like, you know, take that piece out and I'd just see if I could just drill a hole there so I could do that. But I don't know how the internals of that leg works, because it doesn't seem like it'd be easy to take apart. So I think I'll just, you know, not do that and just leave it as is, because the storage on the back is fine. Like, it's fine weapon storage. I just feel like it would look so much cooler if he could have it just on his hip, like a bludgeon usually would. But yeah, no, I think it works pretty well. Like I said, looking at his IDW design, I think they got the head sculpt pretty much just spot on. Like, it's got that skeletal design, but it also has, I don't know if you can tell, but it does have the sculpted detail of having like the wires in the mouth like he did in the comics, which is nice. And again, you know, it's kind of like the robotified version of the skeleton head rather than like a more true G1 bludgeon like they've been doing with the other pretenders. But he's always been kind of a tricky one too, because like the outer shell for the original bludgeon toy really didn't have like much green on it at all. It was pretty much just like the orange and the like kind of maroony or purple, depending on the interpretation of it. So, but he has to turn into a green tank. So this was always one that was like a little bit more difficult to blend between. And I kind of prefer the whole just, you know, no pretender shell version of Bludgeon, where, you know, he just kind of has a skeletal looking face and then, you know, is able to have all three colors. I feel like it's much more iconic to Bludgeon at this point rather than that original samurai skeleton pretender shell. But yeah, no, looks pretty good. In terms of articulation, obviously it's just like Tarn. Has on a very stiff ball joint, so it can rotate around and look back and forth. And then also that transformation hinge allows for a little bit of back and forth movement additionally. The shoulders are the one bummer on this guy. He does have those shoulders that hinge out at the body and then rotate at the shoulder itself. So like if you rotate his arm forward, you can't rotate it out to the side unless you do that, which on him and Tarn looks particularly ridiculous because his shoulders are so high. It's not terrible. You can work around it, but it's not what I would have preferred. That's like the one most limited joint on him. But otherwise gets a decent amount of movement there. He does have that hinge in for transformation, which I haven't actually tried to see if you can get him like holding the sword in two hands, because he does have a wrist swivel as well. Let's see if he can actually pull that off. Yeah, he can do it. Yeah, nice. I mean, he can't like really move or anything. He's pretty much just like that. He can do chopping action there, but he can hold his sword up, which I think is fairly decent there, and a testament to his articulation generally. I mean, again, you know, the joint that allows him to do that is pretty much just a transformation joint, but it still is helpful for certain poses. He's got a bicep swivel, a pretty deep elbow bend there, not full bend, but more than 90 degrees. He's got a wrist swivel, and then also those hinging open fingers, which I think look fairly good on him as compared to a lot of, like smaller figures that have opening hands. I like this design where it maintains the thumb like grip there, so you don't have to actually, rely on the stiffness of that joint to hold the weapon, but I think it looks fairly decent open. He's got a waist, that's that word, waist swivel there. The hips can go forward and back and out to the side. Like I said with Tarn, I love this design where they've just, included part of the hip piece or part of the waist piece on the hip itself, so it can just sink into it like that. I think that's the best way to do, this look, rather than having it, hinge below that, and then these have to be like stupid little skirts or something. So that works fairly well. And just like with Tarn, this is like a separate piece, the green piece, that kind of just like automatically swivels when you turn this, because it bumps into the sides here. So like you can get it in some poses where it could potentially get jammed, but it hasn't happened to me yet. I just think think that's a very clever design there. He's got a thigh swivel. He's got a pretty deep single knee joint, and then if you unlock that second joint, you can get pretty much a full bend. And actually, I think that's a pretty decent looking bent knee too. Like it doesn't, usually sometimes when you're having to use transformation joints for like secondary knee joints, it kind of looks bad, but I think that looks fairly decent. And it's nice that it, because that locks into place, it always uses this joint first, which is the better looking joint. So yeah, pretty good knee articulation there. And then great feet articulation. They can tilt forward and back all the way and out to the side about that far. So yeah, like the arms, mainly just the shoulders, a little bit limited. The legs are fantastic, like full range of movement, probably has more range of movement in his legs than I do. So, yeah, and which is, I feel like with like a kind of berserker type character like Tarn, you don't really get that much use out of it. But with Bludgeon, I feel like it's really nice to actually have like some sort of like, like calm poses where he's like sitting on his knees or something like that and like meditating or whatever. Like you can do poses like that, which I think really look really good. You can get him all like actually cross-legged here and have him sitting like that. Granted, you kind of have to like angle the feet up a little bit so they, because so his butt can actually sit on the ground, but still it's impressive that you can even like approximate that. And then with the, opening hands, you can actually give him a little bit more like candid here. I think that looks really good. And it's impressive that the figure can actually do that. Just because of those like extra knee joints there and how the feet work with all the extra added articulation there. So yeah, pretty decent. Like I said, it would have been nice to get a new Bludgeon figure with his own mold, but if they were going to pick a mold to be Bludgeon that was already in use, this is the one to pick, and it doesn't hurt that it's also just independently a fantastic mold. So yeah, no, I think that all works pretty well. Again, the one bummer with his articulation is just his shoulders, and that's not even the end of the world. It's just not like ideal, right? But yeah, and then obviously you can do whatever you want with the turrets. It still has the like Evo Fusion thing where you can unpeg these and do a big long rifle or whatever. I usually just leave him on his back, but if you want, you can like rotate these around. They show this off too, and then like plug it in like this, so you can actually have the turrets like sitting over his shoulders. No, other way around with this panel. So you can actually have the turrets like sitting over his shoulders, and that's kind of a neat look. Again, I usually just, do sword stuff with Bludgeon, but either way, I think that it's cool to have those options there. How did yeah, like that. Okay. I was trying to remember what the original orientation was, but I just prefer to leave it like that personally. But yeah, no, pretty decent in terms of size comparisons in this mode. Just for the standard one, here he is with Kingdom Sideswipe, just so you can see what he looks like with an average size deluxe. And likewise, here he is with Megatron there. He's like proportionally a little bit smaller than like most Voyagers, but he stacks up. Here he is again with the Revenge of the Fallen Bludgeon, just so you can see, like I prefer his tank mode, and there's some of the samurai aesthetic that I wish this guy carried over, but in terms of like a not klutzy looking figure, I think he looks way better. The head sculpt on this guy was always a little bit weird, and he is like, it's a cool toy, but it's very cluttered. So it's nice to see one where he's actually a bit cleaner. And here he is also with the little Prime Master Bludgeon. If you want, you can give him that as a weapon. I mean, the oranges and the maroon does not match at all, but stupid things you could do. And then what else here? Here he is again with Tarn, just so you can see all the differences there and lack of. I will say one other thing that I wish that they had resculpted, aside from like the heads and giving him the new sword. I wish they had redone the chest plate to maybe look a little bit more like this. But I think the shapes are all still there. I think it works well enough. It's just also a little bit too like Tarny for my taste. Like if they had never released Tarn and this design didn't exist and they released this Bludgeon, I don't think I'd have any of these issues. I think he looks fantastic and it really works as Bludgeon, but this design is sort of inescapably Tarn, and you can kind of see that if you're familiar with Tarn's design. But either way, I still think the mold works for him. And last but not least, here he is with our other updated pretenders, and yeah, pretty good looking group there. It's nice to have these guys actually fitting in together. I think that he definitely fits in with them a lot better than this guy did, so I'm happy to replace Bludgeon in my collection there. But yeah, no, it would be great to see more of these guys. Unfortunately, like looking at the leaked listings for next year, Does not look like they're continuing on with doing updated Pretenders, unfortunately, which is a shame because like I'd really like to get new versions of like Submarauder or Octopunch or any of those guys. A lot of there's like a weird amount of like underwater Pretenders I noticed. But yeah, especially Octopunch I think would be a great original G1 concept to get a new figure of. But maybe eventually, but does not seem like there's any current plans for it. But yeah, no, he's a really nice figure, and I'm glad I got him. Again, I was like not super excited about this guy just because like I was like, oh, it's the Tarn mold. I like the Tarn mold. It's one of my favorite figures of the year, but it would have been nice to get a new Bludgeon. But once I got him in hand, I'm like, yeah, no, this actually really works as Bludgeon, and it's got because of the articulation in this mold, it works really well as him additionally. But yeah, no, great figure, definitely would recommend. It works just as well as Bludgeon as it does as Tarn, even though the design is clearly based more on Tarn than Bludgeon. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to him. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. I do reviews every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. Make sure to check me out on my Instagram account. That's toys.n.art. And without further ado, here we have Transformers Legacy Evolution Voyager class comic universe Bludgeon.